Hey everyone, Eric here from Iowa Robot Fighting, back again this week with the WRC and the review of what all happened and what the plans are going forward. So as I showed last week, I ended up taking 5th with Cowboy in the WRC fights. I was pretty proud of that event and how well we did. I have a lot of notes and plans based around the fights, and each fight showed me something a little different, something that needed to be improved or something that needed to be kept in the design going forward. So let's go ahead and dive straight into it here. The first fight that I had was against Lil Twisty from Superbad Robotics. That's Carl. And Carl brought Lil Twisty to the Minneapolis competition. So I designed this specific mod that I was running to fight against Carl. So that front wedge is my galvanized steel front end. And it made it much stronger, but also I have that wrap underneath so that Carl isn't able to catch my tip of my wedge as easily. And he didn't at all this fight, which was impressive. But one of the things I noticed, and you'll see, and the announcer even mentions it, that my robot was running very, very slowly. Disappointingly slow, actually, but both of us were at this point, so it wasn't that big a deal. But you also notice I wasn't able to put my weapon on. And right here, I got stuck in the floor seam. That right there, you can see that my armor is sitting on the ground and my wheels are propped up in the center. I got high-sided. And the reason that is because I don't have large enough wheels on Cowboy, which is a major thing that needs to change next time. Luckily, Carl was chivalrous enough to continue the fight and push me off of that floor seam, but it was to his detriment for at least this fight, because I ended up winning it after all was said and done. But this was a very technical match. It proved that my wrapped armor, and let's see here. This proved that my galvanized steel wrapped armor is super effective. But it also showed that I'm leaving a lot up to chance when it comes to being a purely defensive robot. I need to find a way to lighten the robot to ensure that I still have an offensive capability. And even Carl mentioned that at the end. He thinks that it would be great to be able to have that wedge with my bar in place. And that is going to be the plan going forward, because you'll see in the next fight that without having a weapon at my disposal, I was left to the mercy of Theseus here. So Theseus is the most powerful spinner, most powerful robot in the Midwest, as far as we can tell at this point. And Theseus was able to literally run circles around me. I was able to get him up on my wedge, but the problem was every time I got him up on my wedge, he started chewing my wheels apart. And you can see pieces of the wheels just strewn everywhere. But you see how he's getting behind me here. Every time he runs behind me, he's chopping a little bit more into my exposed rear chassis. And that was a problem. You can see right here that there's a hole in my chassis. And you just saw him get his weapon inside that. And he keeps doing it, and eventually he wears it down just enough so that I am sitting on the base of my chassis. And I'm done. There's nothing I can do after that. So he goes and tries to push me off. He thinks that, he thought at that point that I was stuck on the floor again and wanted the fight to continue. And I would have loved to have the fight continue, but unfortunately, that just was not going to happen, because he took a piece of my armor. It wasn't even my armor, really. It was my chassis. He completely cut that down to the point where I was incapable of driving any longer, because I was literally sitting on that plate. But to show, and you can see in the video, that I had a weapon ESC in there sitting underneath my battery. And because he was able to get his weapon inside my chassis, he was able to rip into the cables and cut up my cables. Luckily, I wasn't using this, but had he been just a hair taller with his weapon, he would have been cutting in and hitting my battery, which would have made my entire robot explode, would have burst into flames right there. Would have been impressive. I would have loved to have seen that because I wasn't going to win that fight. But that showed a major deficiency in this design. This entire back section needs to be metal in order to stand up to those hits a little bit more. It would be great to have the entire thing be galvanized steel, but I can't imagine that I'll be able to afford that weight. I might be able to attach some steel to this as a kick plate around the back, but the plan is to ditch the majority of this chassis. Take only the pieces that are required for mounting, mount those to an aluminum chassis, and then still have my galvanized steel front end. And this, if I remember correctly, this weighs somewhere in the realm of 135 grams. Now, I'm missing a whole bunch of pieces here, but let me see. Yep, even with the missing pieces, it's still 115 grams. A piece of aluminum, well, this is galvanized steel. That's 390. That's way too much. But I've got pieces of aluminum. Let's go ahead and weigh the piece of Horns of Jericho. This is about the amount. That's only 60 grams. That's 60 grams right there. That is enough aluminum to completely eliminate that chassis. That would drop me considerably, and that would allow me the weight that I need to add in my weapon bar. So the following fights, that was my worst fight of the day, by far. But I started to have a couple of redemption fights. So this next one, which was Cookie Cutter, I saw how effective my weapon really could be. But I was able to cut into him without any issue. And I saw that he had exposed wires on his side. And that became my target. As soon as I knew my weapon was clearing the top and cutting into his top armor, I knew I had to clip those wires to win. So when I saw an opening, him flailing around, and I could get around to him, I went ahead and took advantage of that by cutting into those wires and sending him flying. And at the same time, I knocked his wheel off. And that was it. That was all she wrote. He ended up tapping out, which, huge victory, huge technical fight. I wish he would have been in better repair to have an even better chance at fighting me, because I wanted to see what my weapon would do against a vertical spinner like that. But I got the chance later. So the next fight was Leatherface. Now, Leatherface was an interesting little design and had the control advantage on me. And if the driver would have decided to play the control game rather than the weapon game with me, he would have probably won that fight. But going straight into it, I got one lucky hit right here as he made me jump into his weapon. And I clipped off his part of his blade. It went flying. And that piece is right here. I showed this last week, but I'll show it again. This is the little piece of saw that I clipped away. And then as the fight continued, he started gaining a control advantage. So he continuously was pushing me around, and had he decided to play that game, he would have won. I'm positive of it, because I wasn't able to do any significant damage unless he let me. And that was because my weapon was too high up on my body. I wasn't able to get down low enough and strike him. I could strike his armor a little bit, but I just couldn't strike his wheels. So he started trying to pat me on the head with his weapon, and that was a problem for him. My weapon, because of how I designed it to be an extra set of armor for me. So as it spins, it adds a really dense, high impact piece of steel that you're not going to get through with any top striking weapon if my weapon is spun up. He would have had to completely disable my weapon in order to make that happen, which he wasn't doing to the best of his knowledge. He didn't know he was actually causing problems. And you'll see near the end that he keeps feeding his weapon into mine, and I keep sending it back. And because of the trophy that he gave me of that specific arm, I realized that I was cutting into his motor, and that's just absolutely fried. But I also broke his weapon arm, which is why he gave it to me in the first place. But because he was tapping me on my weapon, he was slowly loosening my weapon. And right near the end, you'll see me spin down. And because you saw me spin down like that, it's because that nut loosened up on the top of my weapon motor. It loosened up on the top of my weapon motor and caused it to free spin. Now, the judge did not see that, and that was to my advantage. That's one of the reasons why I spun it up again, even though it was freewheeling on there. I was trying to prove that my weapon was still effective, even though it wasn't. And that was totally a strategic play on my part that benefited me near the end there, because he called it a difficult to call fight. But all in all, to me, that was a great fight. I loved that one. But it still was not a good test of my new 1075 weapon. No one was causing significant damage to it. But it wasn't breaking, wasn't chipping. I wasn't seeing any issues at all with it, which was great. But I wanted to see weapon-to-weapon contact. And luckily, the driver from Leatherface was also the driver of Nosferatu. And I knew that I was unlikely to win this fight. So before the fight even began, I said, try and hit my weapon bar. I don't think I'm going to win. Hit my weapon bar. I need to have this as a test. Go all in. So he pushed me around. He did as much as he could. He started flipping me over. And once he flipped me, I knew the only way to get flipped back over was by him. He started running me into the wall, making my weapon grind the wall. And he ends up flipping me right back over right here, which was fine. I knew my robot could handle that. I spin back up, and this is where sparks start to fly. That was where I knew I was making contact with his drum. And he loosened up my blade, but then he popped me up on the wall, and that was unrecoverable. So the interesting thing is, and I don't think you can see it at all, I'll have to take a couple of photos of close-ups of the blade, but there's some little chips on my blade here. Not like chunks missing, but indentations. Those are indentations where I hit his weapon. And he later told me that his weapon was made of titanium. And I actually carved weapon-shaped notches in his titanium with my 1075 blade. So that is proof right there that this is properly hardened and I produced it correctly. So now I'll be able to form any type of 1075 blade for my robots that I need. I'm very pleased with the performance of this. After the fact here, I went straight into the rumble like I showed last week, and I will go straight to where my robot detonated. So you'll see from the footage, what happened was I made contact with another robot, and my spun up weapon caused enough damage to my chassis that it completely separated my motor housing from the rest of my chassis. Just completely decimated. And you can see right here that it just cracked away. And that's even more proof that I need to have a metal chassis and a more firm housing for my weapon. But on top of that, my new design will not have the motor directly connected to the weapon, so that shouldn't happen. But it proves to me that I need to have a much more firm connection that is unlikely to have stress fractures occur. But I was also running the same chassis over and over again, even though I knew that it was to my detriment. So, in summation, weapon bar good. Rolled armor and galvanized steel good. Plastic chassis bad. Small wheels bad. Directly attached weapon and motor to chassis bad. So I'm currently drafting up new designs for my robot right now to have a aluminum chassis and a variety of other components. The next tests on my docket are to do some weapon tests similar to what I was doing long ago when I was first designing my robots. So I'll be testing new weapon housings, drive systems, different things like that, but without the motor connected to the weapon bar itself. Evan is considering something very similar for his next robot, so we're very excited to see where that goes. But my plan is to ditch the majority of my variants here. I might run a lighter variant with a heavy bar, but I am definitely going to lighten the chassis enough so I can run a galvanized steel nose with my standardized 66 gram bar. And I'll make more of these, but the sheer fact that one survived is great. That means my forging is working great, so be prepared to see a lot more of that. We're going to try an asymmetric bar at some point. And I think that's going to be a really exciting prospect. So if anyone has questions or has thoughts on how things have been going for Iowa Robot Fighting, feel free to comment. I'm always pleased to see people giving advice and ideas. Just keep in mind when you are commenting that if you're telling me that we should go the easy route and order stuff, we're highly unlikely to do that. The whole point of us doing this is to test a variety of techniques and have fun doing it. And if that involves getting someone else to laser cut something, that's not fun. What is fun is pounding steel for real and building things from scratch. You'll see here in this video that I was originally looking to actually produce my own 3D printed gearboxes at one point, which I was doing relatively well at perfecting that design, but I realized that it wasn't going to be durable enough, and that was the turning point. But since I know that these steel bars are durable enough and do exactly what I need them to, I am highly unlikely to change that. In fact, I'm going to continue to attempt to improve it. So if that is interesting to you, make sure you like and subscribe. We know quite a few of the viewers are not liking and subscribing to our channel. And the more you do, the more likely we are to come out with interesting content. Also, check out in the description below for our team's merch. We have a website that currently has our Iowa Robot Fighting t-shirts and also a coffee mug. We're looking at other potential sites for churning out other merch that would be more interesting. And also, we personally want our own personalized bags for hauling our robot equipment. So I think it would be really cool. But following this video, I will likely not be doing a weekly video from this point on, unless we're coming up to a competition. I just don't have the time at this point to be able to devote to making these videos with a new baby on the way in 2.5 weeks. So I will be taking this down to a monthly video. So plan on the second Friday of every month to see a new video for Iowa robot fighting, and I will try and make it worth your while and make it a large enough video, but no promises at this point because I'm not sure how much time I'll have to devote to it. I'm going to try my best to make sure that you guys are well informed about the Midwest Robotic Combat Association and what's going on with that. We're still making decisions on how that's all going to be structured, when it's going to start, and when the qualifiers are going to happen. So if you're interested in being a part of that, stay tuned. Be looking for me to post things on our Facebook page, on our Reddit, and also on this YouTube channel. Otherwise, I will see you in a few weeks. Stay safe out there.